It's the Criterion. It's the Criterion. Criterion.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Criterion Project. We are really thrilled to be here this week to talk about a very acclaimed and special film. We're talking about On the Waterfront today. I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and I am joined by my friend Conrado.
Yes, you are. I'm right here, ready to talk.
Yes, and we have a very special guest for this episode of the podcast. Our good friend Rosa from Rosa's Reviews is here to join us for this episode, and thank you so much, Rosa, for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you guys for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. I can't wait to talk about this.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into film criticism?
Ooh, okay. Yes, I'm relatively new at this, as much as it surprises a lot of people. I got into film criticism fairly, perhaps 3-4 years ago, and it all started with Wonder Woman. That film just changed my life in a film criticism speaking terms.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it started with that film. I wasn't fully aware of why it was such a big deal, why the film was such a big deal, until I started to read articles and I started to watch videos and such, and learned that it was the first ever female alleged superhero movie directed by a woman. And that piqued my interest. And from there on, I mean, everything is pretty much history, and here I am now. But I got into criticism because of that film particularly, as well as the lack of diversity in film critics as well. For me, it's a lack of female critics as well as people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to input my little own grain of salt into this. So here I am doing film school at the moment, trying to catch up on films and trying my best to do what I love, which is watch movies and talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
That's great. So did you enjoy Wonder Woman, or were you not, you didn't realize why people thought it was so great? Were you kind of...
Oh, no, I really loved it.
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed it. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. That's great. And had you grown up watching a lot of film, or was that kind of the whole thing was kind of new?
Yeah, all of this is relatively new to me. I'm born and raised in East LA and grew up in a very low income family. So we would go to the movie theaters maybe once, twice, every 3 to 4 years. It wasn't really prevalent in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So no, all of this is very, very much new to me.
Wow. Since this is so new to you,
Yeah.
what's your relationship to the Criterion channel and Criterion? I think Rachel told me that you just became a subscriber or something like that.
Yes. I just started the subscription perhaps 2 weeks ago. I just started it, and a lot has to do with film school. They are giving us all these movies to watch, and I want to learn more. I want to expand my knowledge on these important films in Hollywood. So why not get the Criterion channel and
try to... So you're also in film school?
I am. Yeah, I'm doing working on my bachelor's for film and media studies.
Oh wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So that's perfect with the Criterion. I read a lot of the classic movies are there, so that's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, great. That's really cool. Well, thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. And we like to, at the beginning, talk about any films that we've been watching, particularly on the Criterion channel. It hasn't been that long since Conrado and I recorded, so I don't know if we'll have much, but have you been able to see anything?
Yes, I've been able to watch one film. I watched Sunset Boulevard. And I thoroughly enjoyed that film. I was very captivated by the acting, by the style of it. It was quite interesting to me.
Yeah.
Overall, I thought it was a good film. I very much loved it. Like I said,
Mhm.
being in film school, I'm still trying to learn Hollywood history and who Gloria Swanson is, and all these silent era actresses. So yeah, Sunset Boulevard certainly was. It's a gem. Now that I think back to it. Yeah.
Great. Was that assigned to you in class,
Mhm.
or you just decided to watch it on your own?
I decided to watch it because for one of the sites that I'm a assistant editor for, which is in their own league, for last month, which was March, Women's History Month, we were doing a special for actresses in the silent era, and her name was popping up a lot, so I just might as well watch the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I really enjoy Sunset Boulevard. It's on so many different levels. You can watch it for the performances, for the beautiful cinematography, the beautiful staging of it. I love the way it uses light and shadows, and I the whole film noir kind of feel to it. It kind of invented that. So I think it's it's an iconic film for sure. What about you, Conrado? Have you had a chance to watch anything?
Yes, I have actually. I'm very excited to recommend this movie because I think you, Rachel, might really enjoy it. And I guess Rosa too, because I just can't picture someone not liking this movie. It's called What's Up, Doc? From 1972, starring Barbara Streisand, Ryan O'Neal, directed by Peter Bogdanovich. And it's basically kind of this crazy homage to screwball comedies and Bugs Bunny and Marx Brothers, and it's so much fun. I had a blast watching it. I was dying laughing. My wife too. It's just so funny. You've seen it, Rachel? Then?
Yes, I actually just reviewed it last month for Family Movie Night over on my channel. And I'd seen it before, but it had been a while. And yeah, it's so funny, especially Madeline Kahn. She is hilarious.
Madeline Kahn is hilarious. I think Barbara Streisand is so funny. I had never seen her in like a totally comedic role before, and she's so great. She has this like incredible like Groucho Marx, Bugs Bunny kind of energy, and yeah, the movie is just like this very silly bedroom farce, and I think it's so much fun. It's available on Criterion Channel only until April 30th. It's part of their 70s Style Icons series, so I recommend anyone who thinks this sounds at all interesting to them, they should totally see it before it's gone. They won't regret it.
Yeah, I agree. That one is one of the funniest comedies I've ever seen. I feel confident about saying that. It's really, really good. And one of the things that's is cool about it is they set up kind of classic jokes, but then they stretch it out just a little bit longer to make you like a little bit more uncomfortable, and you think, oh, they're not going to do, like there's a scene where these two,
I know what you're talking about, the glass, right?
The glass, they're carrying this glass across, and there's all these crazy drivers, and you think, oh, this is going to crash into the glass. Well, then it doesn't, and then it doesn't, and then it doesn't, and you get all the way across the street, and one of the guys ends up crashing into the glass, not even any of the cars, and it just like makes you wait and wait and wait and wait, and that's what makes it really funny.
Yeah.
So good choice. Yeah. I ended up getting kind of an unexpected assignment to review a series, and so I ended up, that took up, because there's an 8-episode series. It's a Messianic Bible series called the Chosen, which was actually quite well done, and I quite enjoyed it. But that ended up taking up my time, so I didn't get to watch Red yet, because I'm reviewing the Colors trilogy. But the next time we meet, I should have that one, maybe even both of the next two done. So that's why it ended up not getting anything done for this episode, aside from our On the Waterfront.
Okay, so the 3 Colors report, TBD.
Yes.
We'll be waiting for you.
Yeah, sorry. That's right. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about our overall thoughts on the Waterfront. This 1954 film. It's pretty iconic. It won Best Director, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress. So it was highly acclaimed. film directed by Elia Kazan, and starring Marlon Brando in one of his most iconic roles. So, Rosa, what were your overall thoughts about this movie? What did you think?
I liked it. I enjoyed it. I my overall thoughts. Overall, I thought it was a good film. I wouldn't say, for me, it's not something I would perhaps revisit, if I'm making any sense. But certainly a film that's worth watching at least once in your as either as a film critic or even as a fan. And because all of this takes place in New York and it's all of the East Coast, so to speak. There isn't much I can relate to in this film. But I was more than happy to just sit back and just look at the style, look at the acting, look at the beginnings of what would be like what we currently know as a Martin Scorsese genre, and just see what film influenced him to do all of his filmography that he's like currently known for. It's a very well done film, and overall I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I feel like this film does things that I wish that other mob type movies did, because it's really, I feel like it's really tight as far as it's under 2 hours long, and most of these mob movies are, I feel like, so self-indulgent. Like, I end up kind of admiring them more than I like them, because I recognize the craft involved. But to be honest, they are a little boring for me, the genre in general. And so,
what are we thinking of? Goodfellas?
Goodfellas, The Godfather, Irishman.
Well,
Irishman.
sure.
So long and so kind of boring. And and I'm not saying those don't have value, but I don't know. I guess I feel like this is just very tight in its storytelling. And I think that Brando is really great in it. I think that him and Eva Marie Saint have really nice chemistry together. That really works. And I think Carl Malden is just such a great character actor. I don't know. I think he really nails all the scenes that he's in.
He plays the preacher, right? The priest.
Yeah. And so I really think it's great. I think it's a very excellent film. I don't know. What do you think, Conrado?
I think it's a very good movie. Being completely honest, and maybe we can get into a little bit of backstory. It's hard for me to see the movie and not think of kind of like the backstory of how it ended up being made by Elia Kazan, the director. Like a couple years before On the Waterfront, Kazan went in front of the House of Un-American Activities Committee back in the McCarthy era, and he very infamously named specific names of people in Hollywood who had been associated with the Communist Party and things like that, and that he got a lot of backlash for that, and with good reason. And then On the Waterfront, he made almost as a way to justify his appearance in front of Congress, right, and his having testified. So that, I think, makes it a little weird for me to watch, just on like a in a sort of like politics whatever level. But I think also, to be honest, and from the movie itself, I feel like the thing that the weakest part of the movie for me was the ending, which I thought was a little too much, trying to kind of like justify and make parallels between the Brando character and what Kazan saw himself as. Like, he went as far as to say that moment at the end when Brando's kind of like screaming at Lee J. Cobb and saying, "I'm glad that I did this to you," or whatever, that he said, "That's kind of how I felt in the moment," and things like that. I don't know if that's the story that I was watching. I feel like the happy ending doesn't totally make sense for me. I don't know if you guys will disagree with me about that, but I feel like the story I was getting was more about I felt like Brandon was being pushed by all these sides, like not just the mob, but also by the police and the law and his whole life as a working class sort of person. That I just didn't buy the ending so much. I feel like his story is much more of a tragedy than what it ended up happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you do kind of have to separate the movie from the controversy. It's hard. I get it. I do, but I
It's
think
hard because the movie's good, you know.
It's 99% of the time, someone standing up to this corruption is a good thing, but if in the very rare instance with Elia, his standing up to whatever he would call it, was bad. And so I feel like that's how I kind of have to kind of separate that out, but I get if that's difficult because what he stood up to wasn't bad. That's where it was just people making choices of what they believed as far as, their political persuasions. Yeah. And so in this case, what he was standing up against wasn't the same as what the character in the movie is standing up against.
I would even say the fact that I think the thing that makes it hard for me is that the story of the movie is so similar or like parallel to his own experience, because there are other Elia Kazan movies that I really love, like for example A Face in the Crowd. I don't know if you've ever seen that, with Andy Griffith in one of his first performances. And that's a really interesting movie about this kind of like country star who becomes a political figure or something like that. And that's a great movie, and because it's different from his history, but this is so close, the idea of like going and testifying, ratting out on certain people, that it's just a little too close for comfort for me personally.
I'm just saying that most of the time, 99% of the time, doing that kind of action is a good thing. But the time when Elia did it was a bad thing. And so
right.
But he, of course, you see you're the hero of your own story. So he sees it as a good thing. But so if I can kind of like take out his exception to the rule and just look at the movie, then I feel like that's what you have to do in order to, but I understand that not everybody can do that. And it's a tricky thing. Did you know, Rosa, at all about this backstory at all with the director?
No, I had no idea. I'm
okay.
completely enlightened by everything that's going on. No, my interpretation of everything, just because I saw I'm pretty sure it's Catholicism, I'm assuming, the church very prevalent. Yeah. I saw Martin's figure more of like symbolizing like Jesus Christ or something.
Yeah, especially at the end. That's totally right. When he walks into the factory at the end. I feel like that's totally like a Stations of the Cross sort of thing. That's what it's actually in one of the special features that's on the Criterion channel. They have a lot of great interviews actually there. There's one in which Martin Scorsese and Kent Jones talk about On the Waterfront, and they kind of mentioned that, Scorsese talks about how influenced he was by the movie. So you were totally right, Rosa, to point out that this feels like an influence on him, because it was in a huge way. And he talks about that ending and how Catholic he feels like that is when he's like bleeding and walking slowly into the factory,
Yeah.
Kind of resurrecting.
I mean, and you have it very blatantly told. So I think it's probably the highlight of the movie is as Carl Malden as the father, and he is on this ship getting eggs pelted at him, he says, some people think the crucifixion only took place on Calvary. They better wise up. Taking Joey Doyle's life to stop him from testifying is a crucifixion, and dropping a sling on Kevin and Kay Dugan because he was ready to spill his guts tomorrow, that's a crucifixion. And every time the mob puts the pressure on a good man and tries to stop him from doing his duty as a citizen, it's a crucifixion. And anybody who sits around and lets it happen, keeps silent about something he knows that happened, shares the guilt of it just as much as the Roman soldier who pierced the flesh of our Lord to see if he was dead. And I think I really think Carl Malden was an amazing actor, and I think he delivers that whole scene just perfectly. If he was going to have an you can just see it in the Oscar reel. Like if he was doing a career highlight, you'd have that. I mean, it's such a great scene.
And he was nominated.
I love him. This is a small role, but I love him in the Disney Pollyanna. He plays a pastor in that as well. He's so good. And he's also great in Gypsy. Really good in that. So he's a really, really great actor. And I think that adds to what you were saying, Rosa, about the idea of Brando's character being a sort of messianic kind of character. I mean, it flat out says it in the script. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it's really at its heart, it's kind of an underdog story of this kid who was going to be a boxer. He had all this potential. He listened to his brother, and he threw the match, and then he ends up standing up against the big the mob.
Are you trying to say that he could have been somebody? It could have been a contender.
Yeah, that's right.
That's terrible. I was practicing my Brando before, but that was bad.
Instead of a bum, which is what I am.
Let's face it. Should we talk about Brando?
Yes.
I was very impressed because it had been a long time since I had seen any of the young Brando performances, and I thought he was so incredible in this movie. Very well deserved win for Best Actor, and a great performance. Even especially, I would say, in the scenes in which he is not being so dramatic. Obviously what we just talked about, the contender scene is very famous, but I think even the scenes in which he's just walking in the park with Eva Marie Saint and flirting with her and everything, he's so natural, and I think you can really tell kind of the acting training that he had from people talk about method acting or whatever. He was a student of Stella Adler, and I have studied a little bit of her stuff for school. And there's a moment in the park where she drops her glove and then he picks it up and he kind of feels it and then gives it back to her. But later, that feels like a very much the kind of exercise that she would have her students do in order to imagine the world around them and really feel all the props and get into the character. And I thought he was great.
Yeah, he was so good because he's not just a thug. He's kind of shy, I think, in his performance, and kind of a quiet guy, even though he can also be quite, passionate and loud and have all the there's that nuance to his performance that I don't even think is really there in Streetcar Named Desire, which is just all passion.
Mm-hmm. He feels,
I don't know.
He feels to me like a guy who's kind of almost trapped or determined by his environment, by the place that he grew up in. Scorsese, again, on the interview, he talks about how growing up in, Little Italy, he felt watching the movie that he knew those guys, that he had seen them on the streets, that he had grown up around people like the Brando character who were kind of workers, and they were kind of in between the mob, and they could have been something, but then it didn't work out for them and things like that. And I feel like I've seen that kind of person before. I don't know, Rosa, maybe, I don't know, do you feel like maybe there's something there in East LA, your experience growing up? I don't know, I feel like back home in Peru, I knew a couple people like that too.
Oh, interesting. Well, because this is perhaps my second or third Marlon Brando film that I've seen, I really don't feel I have how can I say? I don't think I'm in a place where I can say anything about his acting since I haven't been exposed to much of it. But his acting, I enjoyed it. I liked it. There was a couple scenes where he does seem very organic and just natural when it comes the park scene you guys were talking about. It just seemed like nothing. You're just probably just walking by and just seeing these two people just having a conversation. And overall, his acting, I thought it was good. But I think for me, what stuck to me the most was probably that car scene with his brother. That particular
Right.
scene just stands out the most to me. And in regards to your question, yes, I know a lot of people like that growing up. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that scene, along with the scenes with Eva Marie Saint, are really where you get to see sort of the vulnerability of the character, that he's not just a thug, that he really has wishes and dreams and goals, and he's not just a soldier for the mob, like it maybe seems at the very beginning.
Yeah. And what was very interesting to me as well, kind of going off of what Rosa mentioned about him feeling so natural, is I think that because this is 1954, we're right at the moment where you can see his performance kind of in comparison to the other actors who are maybe not exactly in the same kind of performance world, I feel like he influenced so much that later movies, people become more and more natural. But seeing him maybe with everyone is really great in the movie, but like his acting style, I feel like it's a little different from everyone else who's in the movie, and that even makes it pop a little more. Like I feel like I can see how this is different, and it's a great example of, for people who are interested in the history of acting and how it changes, to see it kind of changing at the moment where it changed, kind of.
Yeah, I can see that. Did you think that he and Eva Marie Saint had chemistry together?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the park scene just said it all to me. It was just the natural flirtation amongst the both of them, and yeah, I think they did. I mean, it convinced me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and then that scene where it's I guess maybe forceful for modern standards, but I don't know, that scene where they kiss, I think is pretty intense. I thought they have really great chemistry. What do you think, Conrado?
Yeah, I think the acting in the movie is great. I think they're great. Carl Malden, like you said, is great. Lee J. Cobb is really good. Rod Steiger, who plays the brother in the car scene, he's also great. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing, what I will say about Elia Kazan, despite everything that I might have issues with him, is that I think he was an excellent actor's director, and he gets great performances in in every movie that I've seen of him so far, which are not that many, but in the small sample that I have, he's been excellent at that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And what do you think about the Golden Warriors?
That's the boys, the boy gang,
the pigeons, right? Yeah, the pigeons.
Does anyone know if that's an actual thing? Like it's like, was there a fad of like having these coops and all these pigeons?
Yeah, even in Rocky, he's got.
Oh, you're right.
Pigeons. Yeah, so it carried on for quite a while, and it doesn't make any sense to me because I think pigeons are disgusting. but that scene at the end when you see and the kid's crying and he's killed all the birds, it's a pretty sad scene, I think. And I think the script is actually really good in this movie. Again, if you could kind of separate from real life and just look at it as standing up against corruption, then I think it's a really good script.
Yeah. And the script was written, from what I know, from having read the backstory of the movie, it was written before. It was not written it was written separate from Elia Kazan. He kind of like met Bud Schulberg, the screenwriter, and they were talking about ideas that they had, because Kazan was going to make a movie about dock workers like years before this. And then this guy, Bud Schulberg, was like, oh, I actually have written a movie about dock workers in New Jersey. Maybe you want to do that. And he ended up doing it. He obviously read the script and identified so much with the Marlon Brando character, with Terry, that that's kind of also why he decided to do it.
Oh, that makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, and you really see a full dynamic character in Terry, because he starts out, kind of doing what he's told. He says that, he's not going to rat, and he's not going to, and then between his relationship with Dave Mercent character and his conversations with
Barry.
the Carl Malden character. Yeah, Father Barry, he starts to grow and he starts to change, and you see it little bit by little bit, and that, at least it's supposed to help you buy the ending where he's fully changed as a human from the beginning to the end, which you don't always get in, like, I didn't feel that way about The Irishman. I felt like his character was fairly stagnant the whole time, and whereas this, you really see a dynamic character. And I mean, I've said this is my favorite mob movie because I just feel like the storytelling is so lean and it's so well done in every other way, and it has like a clear message. And it's obviously not my favorite genre in the world, but I'm not saying those movies don't have value, but I don't know, to me, this is just really well done.
I think that makes sense, knowing you and what you just said, Rachel. Especially since mob movies are not your favorite genre, because this feels a little this feels different from the typical mob movie, and I think it's because of what you're saying about the characters changing. I think so many of the great mob movies are about characters that are kind of trapped in that world and refuse to change. You know, that's what you get in Godfather. In Godfather, you kind of get the opposite story, right, of a guy who's a decent guy who gets pulled into the darkness of this world, and then from then on, he doesn't really change. He's like stuck in that world, you know, and that's definitely The Irishman and Goodfellas and all of those things.
Rosa, do you have a favorite mob movie?
I haven't seen that many, just because I'm right there with you, Rachel. This is not my genre, but
they're just so long.
Yes, if I have to pick one, I will echo everything you just said and probably have to go with this one. The rest are, to some extent, they can get a bit boring, but overall, I think this would probably be my favorite one for that. And then just other little reasons. I appreciated the little nuggets they put in there, like with Marlon Brando's hook that he was always carrying. And then I'm not sure if that was like a resemblance to like his boxing skills, like he was always throwing a hook or something. And that's how he like found his brother, unfortunately.
Which was a pretty grisly scene for 1954. Like, I was kind of shocked. I'm like, whoa.
And I think what adds more to it is the score. The score in this film is, when the film first started, I was thinking it was just gonna be too much. It's just perhaps a bit exaggerated. But as the film progressed, I was able to get into it, and the score certainly did a lot for me in this movie.
That's a really good point, because it's Leonard Bernstein did the score, and he is a famous composer. He did West Side Story and a bunch of other stuff, and that really did help too. I agree with you. The score it helped a lot. So let's go with our questions that we do. First, we like to ask that what do you think makes this a Criterion film? Do you have any thoughts about that, Rosa?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure what the Criterion means. It's a definition in it. So I would probably have to pass.
That's okay.
You are just entering the world of Criterion. So I feel like in a few months I feel like you will know exactly what that means, especially after being in film school. It's just that the kind of like important, the masterpieces and things like that.
I think that this is a Criterion film because it's so lauded. I mean, it's very few films have won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor. Got nominated for so many different awards. It's just so iconic. It has so many iconic lines. It's an iconic Brando film, and so I think that it's just a natural choice, just on its prestige as alone. Would you agree, Conrado?
I think it's a hugely influential film Definitely. You know, the Brando performance, but also the way it was shot, the, you know, shooting in the streets, and this kind of like very, like you were pointing out, visceral kind of violence to it in its own way, you know, which feels like a definitely a big deal for 1954. And that it's not that it's violence, that it's kind of very gritty and very down to earth, and feels influenced kind of by kind of like Italian neorealism or whatever. Like it feels like something that wants to be very, very realistic in a way that is making a departure from classic Hollywood. You know? So I think that's definitely, and if anything, I would say it's a big kind of deal that it's included, despite the kind of controversies around it with Elia Kazan. And I think that's interesting in its own way, right? Like I think a lot of the writing about the movie and a lot of what I've seen of the extras that are on the Criterion channel for it, are kind of wrestling with this question of like how to view this kind of movie when there is controversy around it and what to do about it.
Yeah. Well, it's true because you don't, you don't want it to be a lesser version of the same situation would have been like total propaganda, but because it's so well made and it's so well done that it's not.
It forces you to have to deal with it, which I think is interesting.
Yes, that's a good way to say it. Yes, so then we have what we call the pretentiousness scale. And so a movie that's really sort of artsy and hard to understand is like a 10, like a Godard film. And then like one that's super mainstream, super blockbuster, everybody can enjoy it. It would be a 0 or a 1. So Conrado, where would you put this film on that scale?
It's a good question. I think it is probably somewhere in the middle, high, maybe like a 6 is where I would go. Definitely meant to be a mainstream film, but also has an extra layer of pretentiousness to it. And I think it's that kind of like, I think it's the Kazan's own history and his own style, and the fact that he's bringing so much of himself and trying to justify himself. He was also a very he was a theater director also, as much as he was a movie director. And I guess that's my way of saying he was a pretentious man in real life. Like having read a few of the chapters in his biography actually in preparation for this.
Oh,
he comes off as kind of a big a-hole, to be honest. He says mean things about almost everyone that he knew. So he was probably a very pompous person in real life. And I think he brings that energy to all of his projects. They always feel very artsy for their time. So I would say maybe even higher than a 6, actually. I don't know. What do you think, Rachel?
I don't think it's very pretentious, to be honest. I think if I was looking at it as a modern viewer, I think that unfortunately, for better or worse, I think there's some people who would feel just by the fact that it's black and white makes it. There's some people who that makes it more of a challenge, which is a shame. But I also, I mean, it has sort of higher ideals. It's trying to share a message. It's I gave it a 4. I don't think it's that pretentious. I mean, especially because I think the script is so tight. It's not. They don't like take time. To me, a really pretentious film is one that takes unnecessary time just for artistry, which can be fine, but it makes it a little more pretentious to me. If you have sort of scenes where people are twirling or that are just for sort of abstract art, like that to me is when we get more into things that are pretentious. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts about that, Rosa? Did you feel like it was an accessible movie or not so much?
Well, for me, being a first-time viewer and someone who isn't really well-rounded with cinema history, I would, based on your scoring, I would probably give it a 5. Right in the middle of the scoring between you two. But yeah, probably a 5 because I didn't find it difficult to follow or anything as such, but as well, the black and white doesn't bother me either. Unfortunately, I'm sure there is a group of people that will find that as a disadvantage, but I also acknowledge that it's not going to be for everybody. So it's not something you can just pick just random fans to just come watch this film. It's not going to be for everybody. So I would probably just sit it right in the middle at 5.
Yeah, very good. Very good. All right. Well, the last thing that we have is we sort of pitch our remakes. And I have to admit, usually I'm more creative than I was today. But I don't know. I just feel like I think that it would be interesting to see just a pretty straight remake of this movie. And I wouldn't even modernize it. I would just, and not that you want to do shot for shot because that's awful, but a pretty straight, I think, remake would be interesting to me. And I think that you got to go with Ryan Gosling. I mean, I feel like he's the modern Brando.
Interesting. Okay.
To me, at least, he's the obvious choice in my opinion. And so I would have Ryan Gosling, and then I would have Scarlett Johansson in the Eva Marie Saint role. I think she's also sort of the natural choice. And I think they'd have really good chemistry. I'm not sure if they've been in a movie together, but it feels like they have, but I'm not sure. But then I would have Robert De Niro playing the mob boss. I mean, that seems also kind of obvious.
A fight between Robert De Niro and Ryan Gosling, it's not going to be very climactic.
I guess that's
I feel like
true.
it's going to go down real quick.
I guess that's true. And I would just be, I guess, interested to see what a fairly standard remake would bring to this material. I just feel like it's been long enough that we could see somebody with a different style without the personal baggage of Elia Kazan in the story, and hopefully it would introduce some people to the movie, and then they could check it out as well as the new one. But yeah, I don't know.
Who would you cast? Who would you cast in the Carl Malden role? That's your favorite.
I know. I love that role. That's why I was struggling to decide who. I mean, it's a shame because somebody like, I wish we could go back in time and have like Philip Seymour Hoffman.
I was going to say, I totally picture Philip Seymour Hoffman.
He would have been perfect because he was such a great character actor. But maybe, oh gosh, shoot, what's his name?
How about like a John C. Reilly?
John C. Reilly, he could do it. I was going to say Bryan Cranston maybe could be interesting in that role. And I don't know, what do you have, Conrado?
I was kind of struggling with this one. I was not so sure what to do because of what you say. I feel like the movie is so iconic and Brando's performance so iconic that I don't know about a straight remake if it would be any good. So I think maybe what I would like to see is maybe like a behind the scenes kind of thing of like a movie that like gives us a little bit of a, the story of how the movie was made, because it was very influential in the kind of new techniques that it had. It filmed so much on location, which was unusual for the time, and the cinematography and the score, like you guys were pointing out, is so specific. And of course there's the whole thing with Kazan and his backstory. So I don't know, that's kind of where I'm leading. I haven't cast it or anything like that because I was kind of struggling for this one.
But you seem surprised that I picked Ryan Gosling. Do you think there's someone else because he seems like, just to me, the obvious choice?
Because he's kind of handsome and smoldering. Is that?
Yeah, and I feel like he's played a lot of roles. He's also very very meta actor.
I guess that's true.
I like something like Place Behind the Pines seems like a total Brando role,
like an early Brando. I guess you're right. For some reason, I always think of Brando as more chameleonic than he actually is. Like he, when like then looking at this, I'm starting to get it. I think I get where you're coming from.
Yes. Rosa, did you have any thoughts about if you were assigned to remake On the Waterfront, what you would
Oh
would do?
man, I am not good at this. Yeah, I probably would terribly fail at this. Yeah, I actually can't think of anybody.
I have a suggestion actually because of something you said earlier, Rosa. I am curious, what do you think the kind of like the West Coast version of or On the Waterfront would be? Like
Ooh,
like the LA sort of Mexican Chicano version. Maybe
Yeah, that could be
maybe we could
interesting.
get like a Michael Pena or Oscar Isaac in the role.
right. Or
Ooh.
I would go with Oscar Isaac. Definitely Oscar Isaac. Even like
he also has
or even like throwing the Edward James Olmos as the mob guy. But
totally.
yeah,
He could be the mob guy, or he could be the father, the priest.
Yes.
Jimmy Smith.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yes, Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now my wheels are turning.
Yeah.
There we go. Who plays Eva Marie Saint?
Yeah.
Maybe Gina Rodriguez, America Ferrera. I don't know.
Ooh, yeah.
I would go with
that.
Gina Rodriguez, definitely. Yeah, I can see that too. Or what's his name as the priest? He comes out in the Annabelle films. As the priest. Oh my.
Annabelle. Let me Google that.
He also came out in The Curse of La Llorona too, just like a little cameo as the priest.
Yeah, I mean Oscar Isaac is older than Brando, but he was in that Most Violent Year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and that's kind of a mob movie, and it's also kind of in the Ducks, so you know.
Yeah. With Jessica Chastain.
Yeah. I'm not sure who you were trying to talk about, Rosa. I couldn't find the info. But I was thinking maybe Danny Trejo could be in a role in there. Maybe one of the mobsters or something.
Yeah, I can see that too. And who else? Now that I'm thinking about it, I just recently watched a movie. It was not recently. It must have been last year. It was called Chicano, and I saw George Lopez in it. He was pretty decent. He carried his weight and his I can see him too as one of the mob.
And that would be cool to see George Lopez in like a big dramatic role. Maybe he can get some Oscar buzz for it, supporting actor. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you have a hit in your hands, Rosa.
Yeah, I think I might.
Well, one movie that has some similar themes that I saw at Sundance that is in a different setting is called Charm City Kings. And this is a film about this gangs in Baltimore. And particularly they ride these like dirt bike motorcycles. And this kid whose brother died in the gang wars. And he's still sort of tantalized by them. And I didn't love the ending. It wasn't perfect, but it's still definitely worth checking out if you get to see who knows when anything's getting released these days, but it's one to keep on your things because it was pretty good. It was pretty good. Yeah. That was an interesting take on a world I know nothing about. So I thought it was pretty good. Pretty nice. Good. So you talking about Tony Amendola?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I think we got some pretty good ideas. Both of your ideas are better than mine. Although I think my casting was pretty right on.
I would see either both.
Because I wouldn't want it to be like that terrible version of All the President's Men with Sean Penn and Kate Winslet. It has this great cast. But it was terrible. So we got to do something interesting with it. But maybe if the three of us could get producing credit, screenwriting credit, we could all make it work.
I will take it.
Me too.
Okay. well, well, very good. So, Conrado, you are you selecting what we're going to talk about next time? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So next time is my pick, and I think because there's the Toshiro Mifune 100th anniversary going on Criterion, I wanted to do one of his movies, and I landed on The Hidden Fortress, directed by Akira Kurosawa, which supposedly is kind of one of the big inspirations for Star Wars. There are some people who say Star Wars is basically a remake of The Hidden Fortress, so I'm curious to see if that's true.
Yeah, very good. I'm looking forward to that. So thank you so much, Rosa, for coming on. This was so much fun to get to know you better and to get to talk about this film.
No, thank you both for being so just welcoming and making me not feel stupid. But no, it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a complete blast. Thank you.
Us too. Thank you so much, Rosa.
We will have to have you on again. And so do you want to share your social media or your content with our
Yeah, sure.
Our
majority of my content is over at inthereonly.com, and on social media you can find me over on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Rosa's Reviews.
Great. And Conrado, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Coco Hits New York, or also on my blog, which is cocohitsny.wordpress.com.
Make sure to follow us at Criterion Pod on Twitter, and we'll try to post some information and different things about what we're going to be talking about. So we'd love to have you share your thoughts and comments with us. And you can follow me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please take a look at that. And also take a look at the Hallmarkies podcast, because we have tons of fun over there. So thanks again, you guys. This was a lot of fun. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section or on Twitter. And we'll talk to you all later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.